1,200 years ago, a great king of Northumbria was killed in battle, and so it fell to his wife, the queen, to take the throne of Bamborough Castle. The queen had loved her husband, and she mourned him dearly, as did their 2 sons. The eldest was named Childwind, and the younger was called Blythe, for he was of a cheerful and pleasant temperament. Indeed, he was a great comfort to his mother in those days. Now at that time, Child was a title for a young lord who was no longer a boy, but not yet a knight. So after a year of mourning had passed, Childwind set sail with the loyal crew to seek his fortune and flee his grief. The queen was distraught to see him leave, but still she ruled wisely and well. Blythe was also sad, for Childwind had been his closest companion. Instead, he filled his days with the caretaking of the castle and its people. His mother gave him the keys to every door and gate in Bamborough, and he wore them on a golden hoop at his waist. Wherever he went, the keys announced his arrival with a cheerful jingle, and the servants greeted him warmly, happy to serve such a friendly and caring young lord. But what no one knew was that a great danger lurked in one of the sea caves near the castle. Here, in the cold and damp, a warlock practiced dark magic and grew powerful. He had long desired the power and wealth of Bamborough Castle, and he scorned that they should be held by a woman. When he heard that the queen was to go falconing, he concealed himself with magic and followed her hunting party. A moment came when the company stopped to water their horses, and then the warlock snuck up and stuck the queen's horse so that it screamed and ran wildly away with the queen clinging to its back. It soon left the rest of the company far behind, but the warlock had magicked himself into the shape of a kestrel and followed them from above. As the queen tried to regain control of her mount, they approached a stone wall. In its panic, the horse misjudged the jump, and queen and horse fell together. Then the warlock swooped down and took the form of a well-dressed and handsome man. Though her horse had risen and stood steaming and huffing, the queen's ankle had been injured in the fall, and she couldn't stand. With her permission, the warlock bandaged her ankle, helped her mount, and led the horse gently back the way they'd come. Won over by his kindness and good looks, the queen invited him to accompany her back to the castle. He soon enthralled her with witty conversation and well-spoken words, and it wasn't long before they decided to get married. Blythe had some misgivings about this stranger who had won his mother's heart and aimed to take his father's place. But seeing the queen happy for the first time in so long, he set his feelings aside and welcomed him for her sake. On their wedding day, Blythe presented the new king with the keys of Bamborough, saying, "God bless you, mother, on this day. Bless Bamborough's halls and towers, and bless ye too, my stepfather, for all that's here is yours." The king smiled as he took the keys, but in his heart he hated Blythe, for if the queen were to die, Blythe, not the king, would inherit the throne. Of Childwind no one had heard tell since he left, and many thought some accident must have befallen him on the stormy northern seas. That very night, while all the castle slept, the warlock crept back to his sea cave, and there cast a great enchantment. In his cauldron he boiled a potent brew. 9 times 9 he passed his arms through the steam, and 3 times 3 he said the weirding words. "I will ye to a loathsome worm, and such shall ye ever be, until Childwind, the queen's own son, comes to the Heugh and thrice kisses thee." And so it happened that when Blythe's attendants woke to dress their lord the next morning, they found in his place a huge and loathsome dragon, and they fled, crying that Prince Blythe had been eaten while he slept. The dragon slithered out of the castle and wended its way to Spindlestone Heugh. It wrapped itself around that great rock and looked out to sea. So venomous was the dragon's breath that for 7 miles in every direction the land would grow no crops and the sea would yield no fish. And every night a terrible hunger drove it forth to wander the kingdom, devouring every person and beast in its path. Desperate, the people appealed to an old, wise witch for help. She told them to set aside 7 cows and every day pour their milk into the basin at the foot of the Heugh. This they did, and the dragon troubled them no longer, but stayed wrapped round Spindlestone Heugh, gazing seaward. Word spread far and wide of the loathsome dragon of Spindlestone Heugh, until it reached the ears of Childe Wynd, who was not lost, but only somewhat thoughtless of those at home. Hearing that his beloved brother had been devoured by this monster, he and his crew vowed that they would not rest until it was slain. They built a ship of the magical rowan tree, and when it was finished, they set sail for Bamborough Castle. As they sailed, the sea wind carried news of their return, but the king alone understood its words. Once again he went to his sea cave, and this time he summoned the spirits of the drowned. He bound them to his will and bade them sink the ship that carried his foe. The spirits flew to their task, but they could not touch the ship because it was protected by the magical rowan wood. Now, from the topmost tower of Bamborough Castle, the warlock could see the sails glancing in the sun, and he knew that Childe Wynd was almost upon him. A 3rd time he went to his sea cave, and he cast another spell upon poor Blythe. Keep ye Bamborough harbour clear, to this I thee bind, and never let touch sand or shore the ship of Childe Wynd. When the spell was done, the dragon slipped from the Heugh and swam to the harbor mouth. As the ship advanced, the dragon ensnared it until it heeled over and nearly sank. 3 times the ship advanced, and 3 times the dragon drove it away. Finally, Childe Wynd told his crew to put about, and the warlock laughed to see them go. But rather than retreat, they only rounded the next point and landed at Budleigh Sands. As Childe Wynd approached Spindlestone Heugh, he espied the dragon and rushed to meet it, eager to wreak his vengeance. The worm slithered to the ground and watched him draw near, but as Childe Wynd raised his sword to strike it down, it opened its jaws, and the voice of Blythe came from them, saying, "O quit thy sword, forget thy fear, and give me kisses 3, for though I seem a loathsome worm, no harm I'll do to thee." Childe Wynd stayed his hand, not knowing what to think. Was this the warlock's magic once more? Again the monster spoke. "O quit thy sword, forget thy fear, and give me kisses 3, then I no more a loathsome worm, but thy dear Blythe shall be." Then Childe Wynd met the dragon's eyes, and they were not like a lizard's eyes, but like those of his own brother. So he lowered his sword and kissed the worm. Once, twice, thrice. Where the dragon had been lay Blythe, shivering with cold and shock. Childe Wynd wrapped his cloak around his brother, and together they walked back to the castle. As they entered the great hall, the queen ran to embrace her children, but the king only stood staring, the color draining from his face, and suddenly he did not look handsome anymore, but old and sea-worn. Childwind gave his brother a twig from the rowan tree, and Blythe strode forward and touched it to the warlock's chest, whereupon that evil man hissed and shrank and shriveled up until he was nothing but a big, ugly toad. To this day, if you search the sea caves near Bamborough Castle, in one of them you will find the biggest, ugliest toad you ever did see.